My whole life's mission is to empower women to make their own money. They have the ability to make money from nothing. They can be moms. They can choose not to be moms. They can be wives. They can choose not to be wives. They could live with their cats and travel the world. I don't care. Like, you can do whatever you want, but I want you to be empowered to make money. I didn't know how to build a course. I didn't know how to get a course up on any platform.
Yeah.
I didn't know any of it.
How much has that one course gone on to make for the business?
$6 million when we hit our first $1 million. I actually had a panic attack.
When you hit that first million?
Yeah, because my brain couldn't hold abundance.
I've already out-earned what I ever saw someone else do. And you would think that you just keep going up and up and up from there. But actually, that's oftentimes where like the wound really kicks in.
Am I going to cry?
Maybe
until the very end.
If I'm doing my job. Well, Jacqueline, welcome back to Powerhouse Women.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited we're in person.
Thank God, right?
Thank God. You're like, another Zoom one. We can't do it.
I don't know why I'm having this flashback. When I did the first podcast, it might have been for your show. Speaking of, we were just talking about like background noise when you're filming. I just remember being holed up in my closet.
Yes.
I don't remember why. I think we had construction or something.
I think you were doing construction.
Anyway, here we are.
There we are. Now we're like in a real
in
place
a real
together.
house that's not mine, but I rented it. So
Yeah.
It is for the next few days.
Totally.
So we were catching up because we haven't seen each other in a little while. And there's been a lot of really exciting transition, a lot of things moving in your life, in your business. And it's really almost emulating this theme that's showing up within our community, maybe yours as well, of just being in this season of change. So one exciting change is you just bought like a dream house. And I feel like for so many of us, that's like a goal to buy like the house, like the vision board house. But how has that process been for you?
It's weird. Not weird, but it actually is like a core childhood wound. So
Really? Let's talk about it.
Yeah, let's get into it. 2 seconds in, let's do it. How do we heal our child trauma? So I moved a lot when I was little. Like I remember we lived in one house till I was about 6 years old. And then from that point, we just moved a ton. Like I went to 7 elementary schools, and it was because my dad was like a gambler and would like make money and lose money. And we just really could never hold on to anything. And so we rented, we bought, we got evicted, all the things. It's just dramatic. And I hated it growing up. And I just wish that I was like those kids where I imagined like the picket fence, and it was, you'd watch movies and it's like, she's like Father of the Bride. She's coming back and she's going back to her childhood room.
The actual house I thought of when you said the idyllic house. It is. It's like the Father of the Bride house.
And then you come home and it's like, that's your house. That's your room. And
it smells like cookies all the time. Fresh baked cookies.
And it's like somewhere to come back to, like an anchor point. And I did not have the anchor point. And so, as I grew up and I also grew up with like, my mom really should not have been with my dad from probably the day I was born, but she was married for 30 years. And eventually she had the courage to make a change in her life and leave. But my whole motivating factors, if you think about like, the traumas and stuff like that get us to where we are, the second I could start making my own money, I did. So at like 10 years old, I started mixing face paint and Vaseline and made lip gloss. Sold it to my friends.
Innovative.
Yes.
I mean, but really?
Yeah. I was just like, let's mix it up. And I was, so I done that. And then with the same face paint, I started my first company at like 12, which was called Jackie's Wacky Faces. And I was face painting at kids' birthday parties, which were really my younger siblings' friends' parties. So I was just like, I'm going to make my own money, because what I saw was like money equaled freedom, options, opportunities, safety, security, all those things, because I saw my mom was stuck. And she always said, I would leave, but I can't because I have 5 kids to raise and I can't make my own money. So for my brain, it was like, well, if I can make my own money, I'll never be stuck. And can I get a house? Because my mom always wanted a house. So, I think like growing up, that was sort of my motivating factor. And we bought an apartment when I first got married, and we sold it. And then we bought a house in New Jersey, and we actually sold that. So I I'm a little bit of a real estate tycoon. Not really.
Basically.
It's like my small little houses, but I got these houses, and I was like, I appreciated it, but it wasn't the dream house. It wasn't the place that I saw, can I raise my kids here? Is this where they're going to come back to when they go to college? Especially when I was in New Jersey. No offense to my Jersey friends out there, but I didn't want to live there.
Yeah.
I wanted to come back to LA. So in all this, I've had to do a lot of work, like a lot of growth work. One, dealing with scarcity and like getting out of that. And then 2, really like moving into abundance, which is where I got. And the funny part and how quickly it moved. 1, my life coach was like, your house is just not ready for you yet. Like that was one thing where, cause I'd like cry. My younger brothers are buying gorgeous houses and I'm like, I'm never going to do it. I have this business. Like, why can't I do it? And then I think it was February, I had done this like meditation situation where we visualized ourselves leaving wherever we were and getting in our car and driving to ourselves in the future, like 5 years from now. And you drive up to your house. And so you're like imagining the neighborhood and you drive up to the house and like you walk in and there's pictures on the walls and all the things. And I remember looking at the house and I was like, this is weird, like in my brain, because it looked like it was in Santa Barbara. And I'm like, I'm never moving to Santa Barbara. So cut to like 2 months later, I find this house and it literally is like Montecito style houses, which is in Santa Barbara. So I almost visualized what it is, found the house, and we closed within 30 days. And I'm like, holy moly, I bought a beautiful home in LA, which if you know the LA market, it's hard to buy here. And then my family. So like, it's just all this, it's this journey of like really, I think from childhood trauma to then like very quickly switching over to like abundance and visualization. And then, you know, whether it was timing or not, I was just ready and I did it and I figured it out.
Okay. Can we unpack this some more? Because this is so good. Because especially with where you started, that this issue specifically and the scarcity, I can really relate to that from how I grew up in a different way. But having this point where I've already out-earned what I ever saw someone else do. And you would think that you just keep going up and up and up from there. But it actually, that's oftentimes where like the wound really kicks in. So for you, when you were in that season where whether it was your coach saying the house isn't ready for you yet, or you're not ready for it, what did you practically do? Were you doing any sort of like subconscious reprogramming, working with your mindset to actually expand to the place where that house could find you?
Yeah, good question. You know, and I realized I did that. I used to, this is like a little backwards, but like I had this thing in my old office that said, what would you attempt? No. It said, Chanel ain't going to buy itself. Actually, that was another one. Chanel ain't going to buy itself.
Truth.
Truth. That was my motivator before I had kids.
Totally relatable.
And coming out of fashion, that's what I wanted. And so it was interesting is like, that was my motivator because I started my first business at 26 and then like my first official business, not Jackie's Wacky Faces.
Beyond when that one clearly you scaled and probably sold for tens of dollars.
Tens. I actually just used that the other day at my kids' class. Like I painted faces for them. So I'm still using that.
It's skill. Very transferable skill.
Yes. So, and then I realized a couple of years into the Product Boss and actually having a business that was generating millions of dollars, I still didn't buy the Chanel bag because like I was still living in that scarcity. Mm-hmm. And so I remember like, I looked so silly. I had like Uggs on and sweats. My hair was in a ponytail. I was just a mess. Like I walked and I was like, I think I'm going to buy myself a Chanel bag today.
Like that was the day that you decided?
I was at a mall in Jersey, going back to my New Jersey because I lived there for a while. And I was like, and I took a picture of myself with like the Chanel bag after I walked out. Cause I walked in, I was like, either I look like I totally belong here because I just buy Chanel and sweats.
Like that level of unbothered. I'm so wealthy that I know I deserve to show up and buy the Chanel bag in this outfit.
Looking like this. Like
yes. That's a different level of do not give a fuck.
Yeah. And I was like, exactly. So I did it and I went in and I bought it and I was like, oh, I can't afford it. And I really think there was a long time of me having to push my boundaries or like push what I thought. Like your brain is going to always tell you and like lie to you and try and keep you safe, right? It's all based on like historical data. Could I afford it? Yeah, I could. Was I holding it for something else? I was probably scarcity of like, oh my God, what if the business crashes and burns and I need the money to pay rent? Like that was where my brain was probably instead of pushing it. So I would say that the first couple of things that I had to do, and I remember, and I have worked with a life coach, I actually upped the time that I was working with her when we hit our first $1 million because I actually had a panic attack.
When you hit that first $1 million?
Yeah, because my brain couldn't hold, am I safe now? Like it didn't know what to do with abundance in a lot of ways. And so one of the first things she said was like, she's like, what's something, and I recommend this to people, what's something that you could treat yourself with that your brain's not going to freak out about, but you're like, I'm going to push it. So if you're really into chocolate, like, can you go buy an expensive chocolate bar? Like if you're like, oh, it's so delicious, or you really want massages, can you actually go book yourself a massage? So, because we're always going to have the reasons why, especially I think as women, like we allot our money to taking care of other people more than ourselves.
Can't relate to that at all.
No, not at all. Meanwhile, my husband like won't stop buying supplements. I'm like, the amount of supplements you buy is equal to the bags I buy. So
it's the same.
It's the same.
The same expenditure.
One's going to last longer. But, so I think that was part of it. It was like testing the waters. And so what was funny is, and this was 2020 when we hit our first million, and she'd recommended like chocolate. And I was watching, did you ever watch that Zac Efron show where he like traveled the world?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So he goes to Iceland and meets like a chocolatier in Iceland. So this is me, 2020, sitting in my room, going on the internet and being like, I can't travel to Iceland, so I'm going to order a lot of chocolate.
Icelandic chocolate.
Or like $120 worth of chocolate. And then with the people that we were like in this pod with, like, going through the pandemic, I was like, we're going to enjoy Icelandic chocolate together and taste it. And, and so I think that if I think to my first experience of pushing, I was like, I found something that was safe, but that was like, why? Like I could have gotten a Hershey's bar. And then I think moving into this year, into like being able to do this and doing this in like 30 days was like, I can figure this out. And I had to really go back to challenging myself. When were other times that I felt like I couldn't afford something? And so I even thought back to the very first time we bought our first condo. And I think our mortgage was $1,800 a month. Yeah. And it was like, oh my God, how are we going to pay $1,800
for that mortgage now?
But back then we were like, well, how are we going to do this? And then we lived in New York City and we paid like $5,000 a month for rent, and I remember that freak out moment that I had, but then we always expanded. We always met it where we needed to. And not only that, we grew way past it. So that was, I think, one of the tools that I used recently where I was just like proving to my brain, you've done this, like you've done it before. You felt this way. It doesn't matter what the number is. I felt this way throughout the journey. So let's meet it and then let's expand past it. And so I do really feel like I've taken a big turn over the last few weeks.
And then the growth edge just keeps getting pushed further where you can expand and take the bigger step because you have the track record of showing like, I bought the chocolate and it didn't bankrupt me. Or it's so important too, to talk about what you mentioned with hitting those different income thresholds. And I think if I'm speaking for myself, thinking that earning the first million was going to feel a certain way, were you surprised when it triggered fear?
Oh yeah. Like I was staying at my in-laws' house during the pandemic and we were just like upstairs in the room. Like we were like, my worst case scenario ever, my husband used to be like, cause I was always afraid, like, we're going to run out of money. We're going to be homeless. Like, this is all my scarcity stuff. And my husband would always be like, well, we'd move in with my parents.
You're like,
and then,
that's why I'm scared.
And I was like, how can we live with your parents? And then one day I find myself, this was a choice for living with your parents during a global pandemic. Like I was like, I'm actually living out my worst fear and it's okay. But when we hit the million, I remember just walking out of the house. We were like by the woods and I just like walked into the woods, found myself like squatting down behind a giant boulder, like trying to connect with the earth and like breathing. And I was like, what is actually happening to my body right now? And I think that it was just this thing of like, it was this disconnect between what I knew and then like my subconscious or like my system and everything where like it wasn't matching up and I needed to make that connection. So that's when I like messaged my life coach and I was like, I need you and I need you more than twice a month. Like I need you like every week and then on Voxer. And she's like, okay, I got you.
Yeah.
So,
and it's so important to really, I think, preface that for any of you who are listening, who are maybe your sights are set on making your first 100K or maybe you're working toward your first million, not to think that there's something wrong if when you hit it, it triggers a very deep fear because, and I have my own version of it, but it sounds like what you're saying is when our whole life, one version of reality actually feels safe. It may not be the version we want, but living in poverty, living in scarcity and lack actually feels safer than what we think we want, which is abundance. It's going to take some rewiring to make abundance feel safe.
Yes. 100%. And it's like, I think my mom had said it to me once. She's like, it's like an old saying where it's like, if everyone took their baggage and walked out on the street and put their baggage in the middle of the street, like imagine like luggage, and you then could pick anything, you'd go back and pick your own and take it back. You wouldn't want someone else's that you're unsure of what's
right.
That.
Could be spiders in there.
Yeah. Could be abundance.
Razor blades. Could be abundance.
Like what do
mixed
I do
with the razor blades.
Yeah, with the razor blades. So, I think absolutely that's so true. And so we're always in a season of growth and expansion and change. And I think that's what I love about being in the world that we're in and being a part of podcasts and talking to so many amazing people. And I think about who I was before podcasting and who I am now, and just like getting into these conversations and realizing how many similarities we have with each other, but also what we can pick up from each other and grow and expand past. It's beyond my wildest dreams. It's so, so cool. So,
and what year did you start the business?
I started the Product Boss. We really like officially started the podcast in 2018.
Okay. So about 2 years to hit that first million, and then scaled way beyond that since. The other transition that I know you have just gone through is you started it with a partner.
Yes.
And now you're a one-woman show in terms of like the front-facing, the brand, what people know.
Yeah.
How has that process been? Anything you want to share about it? And I'm asking because I was prefacing this before we started recording. This has actually been a theme that I've seen with a lot of different women. Mm-hmm. I actually just parted ways with someone who is essentially a business partner. Mm-hmm. And there was a lot of emotion that came along with it. It was the closest thing that I've had to, I mean, actually like a divorce, a marriage, of sorts breaking up, because when you're building a business with someone, it feels like that. The commitment is the same.
Yeah. So, I mean, I started the business with my co-founder, and we would never have done what we did solo. Like it really was the magic of the two of us coming together. When we came together, we met in like 2017 through another podcast group and had the idea together. We both had different experiences in terms of being product-based business owners. And it was wonderful and beautiful and amazing, but we really didn't start it as a business. We started it as this kind of like fun thing of two friends that really, we called each other biz besties, and we really wanted to kind of like talk. And we did. We talked without the podcast. We were like, let's just talk into a microphone instead and let other people listen along. So it was so good. And the magic we created was so good. And like the bounce back, and it was all so wonderful. I think during 2020, when we had this like amazing success, it was also really hard on people. And her husband was a frontline worker. And so she really was balancing like the kids and the growing of the business. The business was like booming. And if only we could go back to like the 2020 years too, in terms of like all the online stuff,
all the online business windfall.
Like but like just how it was like booming.
Yeah.
And so like, and then all of a sudden we're like, holy moly, we have more than a Friday business. We have like a 5 to 7 day a week business. I mean, it really was growing and expanding. And my thing and my impact has always been, kind of telling you my story, was my mom, and not ever wanting another woman to feel stuck or unsafe without being able to have options. And I really wanted to empower women. My whole life's mission is to empower women to make their own money, that they know that they have the ability to make money from nothing. They can be moms. They could choose not to be moms. They could be wives. They could choose not to be wives. They could live with their cats and travel the world. I don't care. Like, you can do whatever you want, but I want you to be empowered to make money. And that was my broader reach. And hers was different, which is totally fine.
Yeah.
And even though she also wanted to help people, but I think when the going got tough, it was hard to keep going. And we really hit like this impasse, this crossroads, where it was pulling her away from what she really valued, which was her family, time with her family and all the things. And I also love my family, but I also love to work, and I love the impact. And I feel like I have a very good blend with my family, my husband, and all the things.
Yeah.
So we just started getting into it. Like it wasn't meshing anymore. Like our tennis match, which was beautiful, we were like back and forth, was eventually like so many missed balls. Right. And then it was just kind of seeping into so many things. And we loved each other and we respect each other enough that we really wanted to honor each other. And I think she was hanging on because she knew how much I wanted it. Yeah. And I was hanging on because I was super committed. And so really when it came to a head was last year, I really had to make a decision, and it was a hard decision, but I decided to say, I don't know that this isn't working for me anymore. And I want out. And really I went to it with like, you can buy me out, because she had kind of made it clear some other times that she didn't want me to buy her out. Like people had brought it up. Random people had brought it up. Like, do you want her to buy you out? Because it just didn't seem like it was working anymore. And so I was like, well, she's clearly said that she doesn't want me to buy her out. So I'm going to ask her, like, either we have to change some things, or do you want me to buy you out? And so she took some time, and she came back and she's like, I actually think that you're the right person to carry it on. And we really, like, as we dissolved it, when I came to her, I was like, this is what I'm willing to walk away from it for. And I came to her with whatever I was willing to walk away with, was like, I was good. And so same with her. And so I think it was really beautiful about dissolving our partnership was that we really respected each other through the whole thing. And not only do we respect each other, we respected each other's families and like how we would take care of each other's families, because the whole business was built from the two of us and like the intention. So it's been, while it was also divorce and was really hard, I think before we made the decision, I think once we made the decision and it was really like, how do we start to part ways? How do we dissolve the partnership? How do we do these other things? Like, because we respect each other, we cared about each other, and every choice that we made was with love for each other. It ended beautifully. I mean, we're friends still. We check in with each other. She was just in Vegas and like tagged me on a thing. And she's like, oh, I wish you were here, you know, because we'd go to Vegas together. And so, I mean, I think it was a very, very hard decision, because I also had my own self-doubt of like, can I even do this? Do they even want to hear from me by myself? That. You know?
Yeah. If there's like the personal part of it that I think, I'm not putting this on your story, but what I've talked with others about is just having this conversation with a friend at dinner last night of the seasons where I felt like I needed someone else around me because it allowed me to hide a little bit. I didn't trust my own intuition to just move forward on my own. Then when you grow into that place where you're like, actually, I think I'm supposed to, now I have to be responsible for it. What have you confronted as you've gone into this next chapter now? And I think it's so expansive for people to hear before we like just move on to that, just how beautifully a transition like that can go.
Yes.
You can have space for both people to honor their feelings, but it actually doesn't have to be anything that's more than just honoring what you both want doesn't align and moving forward.
Yeah. I didn't realize how lucky I actually was that she is who she is and that we had this relationship, because someone else that was recently kind of going through a very similar thing, and I was coaching her through it and telling her how beautiful it's like. I was like, it's so, we like respect each other. I was telling her the whole story, and then it went totally sideways for her. It was not that. And the thing is it's each person, right? It's like wherever they are in their journey and all that. So I can't promise this is how it's going to be, but I think if you come to anything with like love and respect for each other, and we've always held that for each other, you know, I realized that like I've made a lot of really big decisions that seem really scary, and I didn't know it at the time because I feel like I live in this fear all the time, but I've actually also made these really big leaps. So I think in buying it out, I realized that I had a very clear vision for where I want the company to go, how I want to support and impact people, my mission in life. Like truly, like I never knew, like I helped people. I've started over 2,000 fashion brands with my one-on-one consulting company. I was making clothing lines, right? But I wasn't thinking about like the impact it had on their lives and like their families. But now in the way that the Product Boss is, it's just like, it's a global impact. It's just unbelievable, right? Yeah. For me, you know, the first part was like, first I was like, yeah, I can do this. That's why I'm like buying out this business. Then my brother freaked me out and he goes, it's like, don't listen to your family. Yeah. He goes, well, you know how, this is how dated it was. Like, you know how like Regis and Kathy Lee.
that was the example he brought up. Okay, great. Love it. I'm tracking.
You know, like when and then Kathy Lee had to be, replaced by Regis and Kelly, and then Kelly replaced, and all this stuff. What are you going to do? And I was like, oh crap. Like I didn't realize like I needed another co-host for the podcast. I thought I could just speak into the mic and people would keep listening to me. So he gave me that self-doubt, but then I had to go back to, he's just trying to be helpful. He just wants to make sure I'm like thinking of all things. And I was like, I actually know what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing. I know what my listeners want to hear. I know all that. I was such a mess when I did my photo shoot, because it was like needing to get all this stuff done. And I remember being like, I don't know what I want the vision to look like. It was basically like overwhelming to think, where's this company going? What am I doing? What's the team going to look like? How's the podcast going to change? We have to change the website. It was like so many things. Yeah. So I had to go one step at a time. And I first started with doing this solo photo shoot, which was amazing. And I got to sort of be me, like, because we always joked as partners, like we were doing like engagement shots.
That's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah. Because you're business partners. You kind of like have to stand next to each other, but then you're like, do I put my hand on your shoulder?
Exactly. It's like an awkward family photo.
Yeah. Or we like back to back with our arms crossed, or Yes. So it was interesting doing that solo and really like starting to like have the vision of what I was. And then I really went through a lot of self-doubt again of like, crap, can I do this? And I think I had to do one step at a time. So I went through my first launch by myself. I didn't change the launch too much. I changed the fact that it was just me, not both of us. So I think it was these little steps and I was just coaching someone on this the other day where I was just like, don't make too many changes at once. Like keep some things consistent and make some things changed. And so, the branding changed and I changed the way the podcast was. So what I'm really good at is coaching people. And so I decided to do this format where I had people on and I coached them, because that's what I've been doing since 2007. And then I do these voiceovers now where I like narrate it. So I basically am positioning myself as an expert, And I'm doing something that's so easy for me. Like I love coaching.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge lift to the podcast. People were like, holy moly, like I grew listeners. I got amazing raving reviews, like all these amazing things because they could hear it. So I think these little tiny wins, and now I'm making bigger changes. And it's that thing where you're just like, test try. Does it work? The hardest part right now is like running the company, like the internal stuff and team. It's the harder part. And realizing like the gaps that were left behind with like what she's really good at and what I'm good at. And I'm very, very truly a visionary.
Yeah.
So filling in for that is a whole other thing.
Yeah. Putting on a different hat when you're used to being in that seat is really challenging. But I've also noticed that it has given me this opportunity to get back into parts of my business that I had handed off for a while with the intention to still outsource them, but reconnect with our community.
Yes.
And I know your community is such a big part of the brand, and it's cool to hear how you've taken that and made the changes that felt really authentic to the podcast and things like that. And people have responded. I feel like when we follow that authenticity, but I love that piece about not making too many changes too fast.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so smart. So how have you had to pivot the offer suite? Because like you were saying, 2020, when everyone was going online to learn how to bring their business online, those of us that were offering things in that realm, did really well.
Yeah.
How has that shifted? Because I feel like the market has shifted, especially you mentor product-based businesses. So much has shifted in the last 4 years. So what are you seeing now trend-wise that people really need to be focusing on?
So one thing that we did really well at were challenges. And that's the second that we launched, I think the biggest shift back from, like you said, we started in 2018 and we just ran little masterminds. I think our first year of business, we made 90 grand. And then the second year I think we jumped to like $500,000, but we started doing small courses, like self-liquidating offers. We started running ads. And then really by 2020, we had like full on grown an audience and grown all the things. So challenges worked and they still work, but I'm curious because the conversion has been going down and the show up rate. I don't know, like you're saying, I don't know that anyone wants to sit on Zoom for 5 days and like meet at the same time. Yeah. So that was one of the things I didn't want to change too much when I took over the company in the fall and the winter, because our launches are very much, we have a $2,000 product and our challenge is the thing that is there no like trust factor into then converting them into this. And while I'm not good, I mean, it's an amazing launch that we have. It hasn't gone up. It's like stayed kind of the same. And I'm a problem solver. So I'm always like, what else can we do? How do we fix this? So what I'm testing right now is, and I'm literally just starting it. Like it was like the last 48 hours. One was I came out with a less expensive product. So I came up with $1,000 product, like a 997 instead of the 2,000 or 2,500. That was an easier sort of like, let me just make this decision. And can I sell this evergreen? Yeah. So I'm actually going in an evergreen model where I'm doing more freebie leads. So more like, mini chat, like DM me this word or talking about it on the podcast, basically like, hey, here's my guide of, 200 plus resources for product-based businesses. And then we've just tried it in the last literally 48 hours. We're on the back end. It's like, watch this webinar and then seeing if they'll convert. So we were just messaging because we got our first sale this morning, like our first conversion.
That's so exciting.
I know. I was like, I knew the first one. It's like, yeah, we could hit these millions, but it's actually when you test and try something new and it feels like it works. I'm like, I told myself last night, I was like, I'm going to remember the moment I make the first sale on it. I was also manifesting and willing it into life. Last night I was like, it's going to happen because it means it works. And so we sold 2 today so far. And so it's like a 3% conversion, which is awesome on something because I need to take the lift off of our team of these like live launches. It's a lot. And it's a lot of money on ad spend. It's a lot of team effort. It's a lot on me. And it's also kind of spooky and scary to like hold all of our revenue and waiting for it like in the spring and the fall. So I'd say that's like one of the first things we're trying, lead magnets into a webinar. And then the second thing I'm doing, which was kind of a left field thing was, and this is partially because the woman who basically runs my business, like she's my COO, she's going on maternity leave right when our big launch is supposed to happen. And team has been hard to stabilize to get like the people. So a few of my friends are doing really well doing live webinars weekly. So they're running an ad. They're running a consistent ad. That's the same ad that's like, show up on Thursday at 3 p.m. for this, whatever. So you get this ad like really turning, and you can keep the ad spend down and the cost per lead and all the things. So I'm taking that with my $2,000 product, multi-stream machine. And that's what I have to go back after this and finish the webinar.
Literally, we're just taking a pause in webinar. You were like, I am deep in it right now.
I am so in it because I've like also mastered this webinar framework. So which is fun. But so I'm doing that tomorrow. So I'll let you know, I'll update you. But that's when we're going totally cold audience to a live webinar that I'm going to actually test weekly and see what can we generate weekly with me just doing a 2-hour thing. Cause I remember like so many people, like we're making a lot of money. Like you get a little bit warped, but it's like for people are like, oh, I want a 4-hour work week, or they don't want to work, whatever. I'm like, for 2 hours to make, like, I don't know if our goal is like 25 grand or something, that's a crazy amount of money.
It's a good ROI.
It's amazing. Like if I can do that, I'm like, it's not like, oh, it's like, this is amazing. And I'm willing to put that in to start to relieve the pressure on these live launches. So that's really, I think, the biggest transition right now is we're trying an evergreen model and we're trying a live, and I'm trying a webinar. And that's very different than what I used to do. Yeah. And I'll know more in like the next few weeks.
And I really want to highlight this for people. So you're coaching a lot of product-based business owners. You are a service-based business education. So similar to a part of our business too. And I want to kind of even drill this down for people who are in the earlier stages, because what I'm hearing you say, and this is where I see people getting really stopped, is they'll do their first launch and it doesn't go well. Yeah. And they're like, oh, that's it. This isn't going to work. You are still innovating 4 years in. And I would love if you would kind of even walk us through, if you want to start with like how you started with your live launch process, what did the innovation on the back end look like? What data did you collect? How did you decide what to pivot and how much to pivot launch to launch? And then I'm just like throwing 1,000 questions at you. I feel like I love when people are like, yeah, my first launch did 10 sales. And then now, 2 years later, after 7 launches, I had my first 7-figure launch or whatever that looked like. I just think we skip over how much all of us have to innovate, and we are figuring it out as we go.
Oh my gosh.
I mean, we're sharing tips and things that work for other people, but no one has a playbook. No, really. And so how did that look as you were scaling some of those online offers? Yeah.
I'm friends with a lot of people that have like 8-figure businesses, and like, they're also kind of figuring it out. We're like, what does this work? What's working for you right now? It's always changing. I think for us to ever think, and this is life, for us to ever think that anything is set, like that's the lie. When we're like, oh, tomorrow is going to be like this. It's like, actually, no, like it's a state of being, this groundlessness. And so it's like, if we're just always open to the fact that things are going to constantly shift and change, then you're like, great, this is life. Life is life right now. Yeah. So the way we started was, again, we only had masterminds, and it was like 8 people per mastermind. It was a small business. And the very, very, very first thing we did is we knew we needed acquisition of leads. So we created, my friend Allie Bierk has Tiny Offer. And so she teaches a Tiny Offer. It's very similar to that, which is a self-liquidating offer, which means it's a small program or course that will attract your ideal customer. And so we started selling, ours is called A Year of Content, and it was $37. They basically come in, it's like, here's a year of content for your product-based business. So I said product-based. People are like, can it be for service? I'm like, no, service people, you have all the other people getting you stuff.
Yeah, talk to anybody else on the internet.
You're coming to me for it. But like, it was that. So it was ideal customer called out, bringing them in for content, $37. And if I could get them to convert, which we had a really high conversion rate, we had they're called upsells on the back end of that funnel. So it went from a year of content into email for e-commerce, into Instagram for e-commerce, right? And so a lot of people would buy all 3. So what we're doing there is we're actually getting leads that are paying for themselves, because once they buy the first thing, and they buy on, it pays for the leads that we're getting that don't buy and then do buy. So it was like,
and when you say like paying for leads, it's like the ads that you're spending, anything that you're investing in to bring new eyeballs in. Yes. For someone who's like not at that scale yet.
Yeah. But so let me tell you. So I think we had like a $2,000 ad spend a month, and it was super low for us. Yeah. But it was so high back then.
But it feels so high when you're first spending money on ads. You're like,
I was like a crazy person, like a day trader. I was on the app being like, okay, oh my God, we're up, we're down. Like, and my partner was like, you need to get off the app. And I was like, no, I'm afraid we're going to lose the $2,000. I mean, listen, $2,000 was the most expensive course I ever bought was $2,000, and we're praying to God it was going to work. But it takes that investing. So We started a very small amount of money and we're like, can we convert? And what was amazing, this was like the windfall of 2019. Basically, it was like, if we spent $2,000, we might've been making like $10,000 back. It was crazy.
Yeah.
So we're actually profitable in this.
Yeah.
Now we're not profitable, but if we can kind of break even, we're good.
Sure.
So what it means is like, let's say it costs $10 to acquire a lead, which means someone to find out about you and them to give you their email address, and it costs $10. But if we're selling something with these upsells and we're making $40 off them, that means there's a $30 profit. But let's say all the people who don't buy, it's kind of compensating for acquiring them too. So we started that way. I think we grew to 800 people. We had the podcast. It was small. We had 800 people on our mailing list. And then we decided that we were going to launch an online course. And the best advice I was given was, don't build the course. Try and pre-sell it.
Sell it first.
Yeah.
That's exactly what we've done.
You did. Okay. So, and that's actually what I just did with my most recent course. It was like, see if anybody actually wants it.
Yeah.
And so we came up with a concept, which is multi-stream machine today, which is like our signature program. It's what we're known for worldwide. And we came up with it and we created this like sales page and it said, this is what's in it. And I remember we were asked like, how many people need to buy for you to move forward? And it was also $500 at the time. And so my partner was like, if we sell 2, we'll move forward. And I said, if we sell 10, we'll move forward. And we sold 40 out of 800 people, which was actually it's a
great conversion rate.
Great conversion rate. And we're like, oh my God, we've made money now. We made enough money to pay for the course to be built. We knew nothing. So I just want everyone to hear, like, I didn't know how to build a course. I didn't know how to get a course up on any platform. I didn't know any of it, but we pre-sold it to make the money to pay for the people that knew more than us. And that's where we put our first amount of money, and millions and millions and millions of dollars later, that initial like investment has paid off time and time again.
Yeah.
So
I was going to ask, I don't know if you're like even know the number or willing to share, how much has that one course gone on to make for the business?
I mean, it's made the majority of our revenue, I would say. So I don't know, like $6 million. I don't know, something crazy. I don't know, something insane.
Millions plural.
Millions
Which is
plural.
just cool to hear, like from launching it, hoping you get 2 to 10 sales, but having to innovate over and over and over again to the point where now the launch is dialed in and you're still innovating. Right?
Yeah. So it was basically this idea of like, let's pre-sell it. And that was just straight up like, hey, 800 people on our list. Yeah. We're launching this thing. You're going to get the lowest price it's ever going to be. This is what it is. If you want it, you want it. And we gave ourselves time to build it. So I think we launched it in May. We didn't release it till July. Yeah. So great. We've got proof. And then we went back into launches and then we figured out the challenge. So a challenge is basically where, you know, I think we were kind of doing it wrong, even though we've had success. Like we taught too much. Like we give so much information in it.
Okay. This is actually really important to talk about, right? Because we think we're adding so much more value by teaching and giving more, and it can actually backfire.
That's actually what I'm learning right now.
Yeah.
X amount of years in a business.
I'm like, we've all learned that one the hard way. We really have.
So, you know, we started with Rock Your Holiday Promotions Challenge, which is basically thinking about product people and Black Friday, Cyber Monday. It's getting them ready for the holidays in August and September. So we're like, we're going to help you build your promotions so that you're ready for the holiday season. So that's why it's always like an August, September launch. And then we're like, and if you want to learn how to make more sales and get more eyes on your business without an audience or paid ads, join Multi-Stream Machine. So, I mean, we've had great conversions, and because that challenge worked well, it was a 5-day challenge where we originally sold on the last day. Then we moved it over and we were like, let's sell on the 3rd day because people fall off inevitably. Then we took that and we duplicated. Success leaves clues, right? So we duplicated something that worked. And then we created the Bestseller Secrets Challenge, which we did in the spring, which was like narrowing down the products you offer into bestsellers and then scaling with that. And that worked for years and years and years. But we innovated. Like you said, there was this point where we had 3 weeks of lead time up to it, where we were teaching these other workshops. I mean, really our launch turned into like 6 to 8 weeks. It was a lot of live. Yeah. Like holding a container for like 20,000 people. So that's the thing that I've been doing since forever. And then I'm only now switching it over again. And I tested it on this brand new course that we did, which I did the same thing. I pre-sold it, came up with a concept, created the sales page and said, if you want it. And we blew it out of the water. Yeah. Like we blew all numbers out of the water. And obviously the business is much bigger and I have a much bigger audience, but I repeated that process. So it's like, you kind of always want to go back to what works. And if I had gone into it and like with my first idea and built this whole program, who knows if I would have had the same response, you know?
I love that. I love hearing that even at this stage, you're really repeating the same process. If I were going to launch a new program tomorrow, I would do the same thing, where essentially what you're doing is you're testing to see if people want it. But then the other thing that it allowed me to do is, I don't know if you did this, I taught the first round of it live.
Yes.
So I could get the real-time feedback. And that did end up changing the course of how the content ended up. It would have been a different course had I not taught it live. So now talk a little bit about like the new focus, the new offer that you've talked about, because it's and I didn't get to ask you this before, but all about really like standing out, which is something that we all need, product-based business or not. So I'd love if you'd get into this and just anything you want to share with us too about what you've realized, because you've mentored so many different businesses.
Yeah.
And a lot of them that are in very crowded industries.
Yeah. So we knew that we needed another program. Like for our Ascension model, we were kind of missing a startup course. And I was going back and forth because I've helped literally ideate and launch over 2,000 fashion brands. People used to come to my other business, which I'm closing down finally this year, which was Designer Consulting Co-op. So if you had an idea and you're like, I want to start a bathing suit line, you'd come to me and I'd design it, develop it, and all the things. So my brain kept going back to do a startup course for product people. But it's like, what did I do? What would I do with all the people in my community that aren't starting up? Because that's a great program, but I have so many people now that aren't starting up. I was afraid I was going to not have an offer for them. So I really had to think about it and think, what are they missing? And so I looked at Multi-Stream Machine and all the students in there, and there's so many successes. We have like over 5,000 students in there and they're crushing it. But what's the point of why they're not converting? Like, what's actually the difference? And I was like, why are they not standing on the market? Like, they're just another candle company. They're just another honey company. They're just another jewelry brand, like just another. And I realized that they were missing like core foundational pieces. And so what I decided and what I realized was like, Multi-Stream Machine is amazing. It's an amazing program. It's made people millions and millions of dollars, but it's like you almost skipped the first steps. So ultimately, what I saw was people tend to come up with an idea. They ideate an idea. They jump from idea to making it and then straight to selling it.
Yeah.
And so you skip all these foundational steps of building a brand and really nailing your audience and your niche and all the things. And so I was like, this is why they're struggling, because they had this idea, they came up with it, they started selling it, and they're like, why isn't it selling? And it's like, well, because we missed steps. And so that's what Standout Society ended up being and developing into, is it talks about how to stand out in a crowded market and get grow an audience. Right? Get more customers. No, get more customers. Right? So it's
like we'll take both.
I have no idea.
Both options for 10,000, please, Alex.
I was like, what is my hook? I've been in webinar land.
We're still innovating, people.
I know what I'm talking about, but I
don't.
don't.
Testing this.
So, but it's really how to stand out in a crowded market and get more customers. That's what it is. I got it. Yeah. So why your candle company and not someone else's? Why your course and not someone else's, right? It really is foundationally the same information. So we built it on 4 foundational pillars, like the 4 core foundations is what I call it. So it's nailing your niche and your audience. So what are you selling? Why you? And who is the audience? Like, who's your ideal customer avatar? Then it's nailing your brand messaging. So how do we make it make sense? We're not all born marketers, or brand experts. And so it really was digging into, you have a product, your ideal customer. How does your product solve that problem for them? And how do we communicate with them? Then we go into, so that's nailing your brand messaging. Then we go into nailing your offer and your pricing. So what are we selling to them? Why? And this is the part I taught it today. And people are like, you want me to reduce the amount of things I sell to people? And I'm like, yes, you have so much money sitting on shelves because you're making bath bombs and scarves and necklaces. And like, how do we even refer you to anyone?
We don't know who you are.
We don't know what you're selling. So it's nailing your offer and then really pricing, but truthfully pricing psychology. Like the difference between $19.99 and $20 is big when it comes to consumer behavior. And then finally, the last part is nailing your marketing. So it's really thinking about like what a launch is. And when you have this product, how do you get in front of your audience? And, I teach all of this without spending money on ads because when I started my product business, I didn't have money for ads. Yeah. I didn't have an audience. I didn't even have social media. Like that's how old I am, that we didn't use it for, selling. We were just on there to talk to our friends.
Right.
So it's been amazing. Like you said, I've been teaching it live over 8 weeks. And I'm getting all this feedback and all these amazing things. And then it's going to be put into a program that's going to be evergreen. So anyone that, joins after listening to this, it's evergreen, but it's still it's so impactful and it's taught live.
And that's honestly, as you laid out the 4, that's that really is the roadmap to give you just enough to be dangerous and then to learn how to make it your own. I feel like I'm such a big believer in learning in community, so you can kind of pick and choose from other people that are just doing it differently than you or I would do it. But I really honed in when you were talking about like the pricing psychology. And if we could give people a little tangible takeaway in that realm, that's a big question that comes up. We have a program that kind of teaches business foundations too. And you know, I tell people all the time, because they'll say like, well, you just tell me what I should price my course. And I will always be that mentor that will lovingly like volley it back to you. But when someone is coming to you and they're developing, whether it's a physical product or an online product, what process can people walk through to kind of hone in on that perfect price point and understand the psychology of, like you said, the $19.99 versus $20?
Yeah. You know, I think it first obviously comes down to your ideal customer avatar and their expectations. If we're going to talk as course creators and digital marketers, product people have not had as many people selling to them. So if you're like, I have $100,000 mastermind, they're like, what are you even talking about? Versus people who've been in like service or, you know, digital marketing, they're like, yeah, $100,000, everyone charges that. Right. So I think that there's this exposure, there's this like price, there's this exposure, and we could call it like price anchoring. But if I asked you right now and I said like, what do you think a price of a box of cereal is? What would you say?
I have not bought cereal in so long. $5.
Okay. Great. So like, and why did you come up with that idea? Like, why did you say $5?
You know what I do? My mind goes to like the over under game of like, nah, the like $2.99 seems too low and $10 seems too high. Let's like land in the middle. But I don't know. I actually don't know why.
You probably bought a box of cereal in the past, right?
Not for a long time. You're like so now I really want some cereal.
Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Well, going back to childhood wounds, we had like the generic cereal growing up. So that was probably like $1.
You're like, I just wanted the Cinnamon Toast Crunch.
And we had like the cinnamon
thing.
Like, what do you, they always had like the off-brand name, like not Cocoa Puffs. It was like chocolate poofs.
So funny. So when you're thinking about pricing, ultimately customers are anchoring it to something that's historical, something they've done in the past.
Yeah.
And so when we think about that, you know, and you're like a box of cereal, and, you know, people today said the same thing. They said like $5. Some people said $8 and $10. And I was like, oh, with inflation. Yes. And I would have said $10 because I buy grain-free, sugar-free, fancy cereal because I don't eat anything with grains. And so those boxes are $9.99. So when you're telling me $3.99, there's like this different perception. So I think one thing we have to think is like, what are people exposed to? That's the first part, because they're always going to anchor their pricing on that. The second part, especially with product, is that you're profitable. So digital products, we tend to be able to have like really high margins because it's not a physical good that we have to hold on a shelf. There's no cost of goods. We're not shipping it. But either way, I always want people to have the correct margins for their industry, because that's what keeps us profitable, and that's what pays the bills, and that's what buys you your dream house and saves money and pays for the team to expand and all the things. So I think that the first part is like that price anchoring and knowing what are they doing. Then the next thing I want you to ask yourself is, when you see a low priced product, what's your expectation of it?
Yeah, pretty low.
Right?
Yeah.
You're like, oh, that's cheap. What do you think it's going to do? Like people, I love Zara, I love H&M, but we know the quality is either going to make you super stinky and sweaty. Not speaking from experience, but kind of.
We've just heard.
Yeah, we've just heard
from other
you know,
people.
Or like you wash it and it doesn't last very long, right? You're like, it's kind of disposable clothes at this price point versus if you're going to go buy something going back to Chanel, your expectation is that it's like something you have forever and you pass down. So I think a lot of times if you think about your own behavior and you're looking at something and you're like, you want to price it lower because you think you're going to sell more of it. Well, in fact, what's the perception of the product? If it's cheap or underpriced, then people are gonna be like, well, what's wrong with it? Is it not gonna last? Is it not gonna be like, what's the deal with it? So I think it's really important to also think about, and I've actually seen more people who have raised their prices that have sold more than people who have lowered their prices and like raced to the bottom. So I think those are all the things with pricing. It's like making sure you've got the right margins, thinking about their exposure and price anchoring, and then as well as then thinking through, and you know this, like when you're selling courses and stuff, the same person who buys like $400 is going to spend $500 or $600, right? We've got these like price jumps. So sometimes people pick these weird, awkward numbers, but it's like that same customer. Could be another example. I have a client who just made $1 million selling adult coloring books on TikTok.
I am their target demographic. Gonna need that link.
Like kind of amazing.
Wow, that's incredible.
I'll shout out is Shanti of like A Brighter Year. She does all these amazing collaborations and they're super simple. Okay, $1 million. And we were just coaching her and she sells them for about $5. And I'm like, $5, like you could have such a higher margin. And I'm like, $8, go for $8. And I asked the community, I was like, would you buy these at $8? And they're like, yeah. I was like, what can you buy for $5? You can't even get a latte for $5, let alone eggs or a box of cereal. So I was like, $8. And the same person who would spend $5 would spend $8. And now she has a better margin. So I think sometimes we keep ourselves smaller, we get afraid, but I think it's just like always questioning and being curious.
Yeah. Which is kind of the perfect tie-in to the conversation where we started this conversation about also taking into consideration our own programming and what we believe, because you're teaching it the way that it really needs to be approached, which is from the lens of like, who is the target demographic? Where is their mindset? What are they used to investing? And noticing where sometimes our own programming can come in. And that's been such a big part of my journey, is knowing that I simultaneously have to look at those wounds and be working on my own lack mindset in order to expand into being able to own the price that's actually best for the person who's investing.
Yeah. What's funny is like, you're like, this is why I don't eat cereal.
Yeah.
You're like hysterical. But it's true. And actually it is this like skin in the game sort of situation. Like people pay attention to what they pay for. And kind of going back to what we were talking about, we were talking about this before we started recording, was I'm paying more for a coach right now than I've ever paid for anybody monthly. And I decided, I was like, it's like a year. My husband was like, excuse me, what? And I was like, all right, could we try 3 months and see what happens?
Yeah.
Well, in 3 months, I bought my dream house and I'm expanding in so many different ways, paying her. And, you know, the thing is what, and she was actually coaching me in this the other day. And she's just like, she realized that like, depending on the person, how much money they consider to be a lot of money, if it feels too comfortable, you might be like $5,000 a month. Like that's a crazy amount of money. Right. But if someone else who's like a millionaire and they're like $5,000, I don't need to show up for that, then they're going to miss their meetings, they're not going to pay attention. And so a lot of times it's really thinking like, where can you expand your client or expand yourself to like pushing out of this comfort zone into something that is really uncomfortable, which is kind of what I'm doing right now with this mortgage that I've taken on.
You're like, since we brought it up,
I am freaking out. So just so everybody knows, just because it is, it's like this uncomfortable place, but it's like, I pushed myself out of this comfort zone with like what I was investing in her because of what I wanted the return to be. And then looking at it is like, oh my God, like look at the leaps I've made in a few months. And then same thing with like moving to this house. And then it's just this expansion of it, like going near growth edges, because you have to grow past that.
Yeah.
And so I think whenever anyone's scared, I want you all to just think about like kind of what I started using was like, when have I felt this way in the past? How did I overcome it? And you'll realize, oh, that feeling is so similar. It's the same feeling. Yeah. It's just at different levels, you know, at different times.
Yeah. And anchoring yourself in the times when you did it and you grew because of it. And I think that's important, because the other side of it that I see, sometimes this gets thrown around as like a clip on the internet, like, oh, just make the investment and then you're going to expand into it. You have to have also built the foundation of trust in yourself to know that you are the type of person that when you invest, you're going to show up.
Yes.
If you're the person who invests and you've invested in the $2,000 course and you never completed it and didn't show up for it, start there. Start by like cleaning up your integrity with the other investments that you've made, because then you get to play this fun game of, okay, I'm going to make this bigger investment and I know it's going to expand me to step into the version of myself that I want to be.
Absolutely. And it's funny because now I think about all the $2,000 courses I probably bought and haven't gone into, because remember, like that first course I ever bought, actually it was like Amy Porterfield's DCA.
We love you, Amy.
I know, we love you. And I remember her like talking about, and I remember messaging her and being like, Amy, we pre-sold it, 40 people, we made all this money. She had us like, she talked about it on the podcast at one point. And I remember being like, this is so much money. And then now it's like, and I tell people this, I want you to eventually look back and be like, I spent $2,000 on a course. I spent $1,000 on a course. I joined a mastermind for $20,000. And one day I want you all to know that like, you will look back and be like, oh, like that's not that much money, because we've expanded past that. But if we think we're going to get there without putting in the effort, the energy, the expansion, working with coaches, having people kind of push us out of that comfort zone, we're going to kind of stay stuck. And so it's like, it's constantly expanding into that space and like pushing. And then it's so cool because one day you look back and you're like, oh yeah, like that felt like I was tracking the $2,000 on ads, and now I might be spending 100 times that like in a month. And like, I'm not tracking it at all. Right. I'm like, just tell me, are we converting or not? So, it's all growth, and it's kind of bonkers if I look back at like how quickly it happened, but I'm proud to say that I'm proud of myself, which isn't something that would have come as easy for me to say in the past.
Yeah. Which we'll circle back to that in a minute, because that's where I love to end these episodes. But before we do, for those that are listening to this and maybe they haven't ever invested in that first course, or they're hearing you talk about like the pillars that are within Standout Society, where can people learn about it? I know we'll link it in the show notes, but who is it the course really for?
Yeah.
And when you're seeing this first group come through it, like what are some of the breakthroughs that you're already watching happen?
Oh, it's so good. I mean, people just keep going like, oh my God, so much clarity, or like, wow. Like, someone today was like, I'm selling a candle for $79.99 and my friends and family won't buy it. And they say it's too expensive. Like, cause they're not your ideal customer. It's like, and then I go to a farmer's market and people are buying. I was like, cause nobody's at this farmer's market in middle of nowhere. No offense, but like looking to buy an $80 candle. Yeah. And also you're saying it's $79.99. So there's so many things that I've just talked about that like are mixed up in that.
Yeah.
So I think what's cool is that I think the biggest thing is like having the courage and confidence, and confidence comes with learning, with being open to new knowledge, surrounding yourself in community, and knowing you have something to fall back on. Because all of us, like you said, no matter what level, no matter however many millions of dollars we've made, we're constantly like, we're upgrading, we're learning, we're surrounding ourselves with people that are doing other things like in community. I think that's so, so important. For Standout Society, truthfully, anyone could be in it, because I think there's nuggets, but the examples I do and teach are product specific. Yeah. So if you have an idea if you want to start a product business, if you have an idea to make something and sell it, if you are selling and you're not getting, you've got a product and you're like, I'm just not getting traction. I don't know what else to do. Or maybe you've been in business for years and you've stalled out in some sort of way. Truthfully, I've built it that it can help you if you're just getting started and you just have that idea you've been doing it and you need to clean some stuff up. Everybody's welcome. And it's just foundationally, even for you and me, like sometimes it's like, we got to go back in. Like, is this our ideal customer still? Like, what is my offer?
Totally.
It's grounding back into the foundation.
Oh, it's so important. And I review that stuff all the time. Just like we talked about, anytime I launch something new, I go back to square one. So we'll link all the details in the show notes. It is something you can access anytime, right?
Yeah, we have an amazing training that is just like, it's so good. Like even just the training alone, like if you don't join at the end of it all, come watch it. Like you'll link to it in the show notes, because it's just like, I think it's like huge aha moments for people and breakthroughs. And we really get into some of this mindset and growth work and I've incorporated that into the program as well. Cause like I said, I think this was my biggest breakthrough, was not the doing the more and the more and the more. It was really the growth of mindset and working on myself. So that's really built into it too. So come watch. And if you decide to join after, like, I'd love to have you in this community and help you stand out in a crowded market.
It really is specifically for product-based businesses within our community. Anyone who's in that space, I send them your way because it is a different approach than building a digital product business. And you can learn so much from being in both spaces, but there's certain things that you really need to understand. And I know that's kind of what you get into in Multi-Stream Machine and some of the other courses, but you really are the best of the best.
Oh, thank you.
I'm not actually paid to say that, but this is who I would learn from.
Thank you.
If I were starting a product-based business, which you never know.
Well, and that's the other thing too. I know there's like, I spoke at podcast movement and stuff like that, where people who have podcasts or they're course creators and they want to incorporate in a product. So I would say go jump into like a low level investment. I mean, you're always welcome to work with me one-on-one, but like go jump in and see if it's a thing that you want to get into, because product is very different than service, but it is a beautiful way to support your community or your customers if you decide to launch a side product as like an addition to your business.
Yeah. So I love how you were saying how it's kind of a new experience in this season to really pause and acknowledge yourself. And that's where I love to end, is we just call it a powerhouse moment. It's anything big or small that you want to take a pause right now to acknowledge yourself for, because I miss all of those. I miss the moments to acknowledge the little things, especially. And to do it publicly is like this way for all of us to remember to pause as we're listening to this and be like, well, what do I want to acknowledge myself for? So if I just ask, what's a recent powerhouse moment that you've had that you want to celebrate with us? What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Am I going to cry?
Maybe
until the very end.
If I'm doing my job.
I am looking back at myself like the scared 10-year-old that was just so scared, and telling her like, we did it. Like, you're safe now. And we did it. And almost like, and I found myself like holding my own hand, where it was like, I've got you. Like, I'm no longer that little girl. I'm actually the adult that's made all these decisions that have kept my children safe and supported my husband as an artist and all these things. And that I've got her too. So she doesn't have to be scared anymore. And so that's like probably one of my biggest breakthroughs in the last few months.
That's so beautiful. And you can tell her, honey, we can buy the $10 cereal now.
We can, and the Icelandic chocolate. We're good.
We're good. We're living large. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. It was so good.